This story began when an evil god descended upon the earth and its inhabitants in order to destroy everything. With his arrival, a real apocalypse began in the world, which was not at all like how it was described in books and films. A mysterious evil force was forcing people to turn into mindless zombies with a desire that was only to bring death. Your friends and good neighbors of yesterday could today instantly want to eat you alive, without even remembering who you were to them. The world without involvement was on the verge of complete destruction, and it seemed that there was no way to fix everything and change it. It was at this moment that the protagonist of this story received a mysterious relic. This small stone was the 6 great underworlds. After this, the guy's life changed because he unexpectedly became a warden, which gave him unprecedented strength. However, everything was not as good as it seemed at first glance. The main character felt that something was wrong with this relic. While exploring the 6 great hells, the guy managed to meet a black demon bear on his way, who was called Underguanyin. He also had to meet the 9-tailed fox demon Sudaji, who had once overthrown the Shang dynasty. Lei was here, Genzi, along with countless other sinful gods and great demons. But the most important thing is that the very same entity was here. Now the main character had to find out why they were all imprisoned in the great underworld. If you're interested, you can follow your overseer into the thick of things. However, keep in mind that on this path you will have to defeat the gods, because this is the only way to return back. A huge blood moon hung over the ruined city. Multi-story buildings were ablaze. It was hard to believe that only a few days had passed since the beginning of the apocalypse. The main character of this story was not at all surprised or even frightened by all this, because now he had more serious problems. They were trying to kill him. Meanwhile, in the distance, a huge monster was visible, mercilessly destroying the remains of civilization. He was clearly lacking in intelligence, but he knew his business well. It seemed that this monster had only one goal: to destroy as much as possible and leave no trace of the huge metropolis. At the same time, the monster let out a furious roar, as if warning its victims of its approach. In this city, the danger was not only the sinister giant. For some inexplicable reason, a few days ago, people began to turn into real zombies who only wanted to satisfy their hunger. Now their huge hordes were chasing people all over the city. In such conditions, there was no talk of helping each other. Everyone was on their own. In all this turmoil, no one paid attention to the fact that unknown people were mercilessly beating the main character. It was not clear what could have caused this. Finally, the exhausted and wounded guy was doused with flammable liquid in order to kill him in the most brutal way. The girl in the red dress laughed at the guy and said that they would see each other again in the next life. Her boyfriend was also happy with what was happening and said that he would take everything that the main character had from him. The scoundrel spoke of a mysterious stone on which it was written that these were the 6 great underworlds. The main character would really like to get his thing back, but he clearly didn't have enough strength for this, so he had to just watch what was happening indifferently and endure ridicule. Meanwhile, the villain was already freeing the black demon bear from the relic, laughing at the fact that the main character's sister was dragged away by zombies because she didn't want to give him this stone. After that, the guy, putting a crazy smile on his face, decided to cheer up his enemy by saying that his sister's blood was still useful. The main character was very angry and wanted with all his might to teach the scoundrel a lesson for what he did and said, but unfortunately, he could no longer do anything. At this time, the people who were trying to escape from the zombie horde were very happy to see the demon bear and believed that now the strongest owner of the power would be able to help them. At the same time, the guy and the girl had already jumped into the paw of a huge bear, continuing to make fun of the main character, wishing him to disappear in flames. Finally, the girl threw a lit lighter towards the guy, who was covered in gasoline, and continued to lie on the ground, unable to even move. Then a huge demonic bear, controlled by people, rushed towards the monster in order to fight him in an equal duel. The attention of all the survivors was riveted on the 2 giants, who began to fight to the death on the ruins of the former civilization. Absolutely no one noticed the bright flash of fire that formed right above the main character. The scorching flame engulfed the helpless guy in an instant. While the guy was still conscious, enduring incredible pain, he thought only about the fact that if the next life existed, he would never let it go. At that moment, the guy's right eye suddenly changed its color to bright gold. He felt it and was very surprised. Suddenly, the main character heard an unfamiliar voice, which seemed to come from within and suggested starting all over again, so his heart seemed to start beating with renewed vigor. At the same time, the guy's unusual eye emitted streams of bright energy similar to raging tongues of flame. The next moment, the main character woke up in horror from a terrible dream, but he immediately realized that everything that happened was true, and he still managed to move in time. He was surprised that he was completely whole. There were no wounds or fire. However, the guy was very interested in what kind of voice he had recently heard in his head. After that, the main character quickly glanced at the date on his phone. The calendar showed the 1st of July 2028, which meant that he had gone back in time 3 days before the apocalypse. In order to calm down a little, the main character went to the bathroom to wash up, still not believing that everything had started anew for him. Looking in the mirror, he was surprised to discover that his right eye had turned pale gold. The guy immediately assumed that it was a fire seed that remained after he burned to death. After some time, the main character was already completely collected and went outside to make sure that he really returned in time. He walked along familiar streets and could not believe that in 3 days, all of this would be destroyed, and the people surrounding him now would most likely be dead or turn into brainless zombies. The guy was already anticipating that with the coming of the apocalypse, people would begin to turn into zombies, and although some of them would gain strength, they would not have time to defeat the evil god, and the city would turn into hell. He also thought that his girlfriend, whose name was Ruolan, and his best friend Shijun would soon betray him without hesitation and contribute to his death. As soon as the main character thought about this, he immediately received a call from Ruolan on his phone, which surprised him a little. Despite the resentment for what would happen, he still answered the call. The girl immediately began to ask with displeasure why Xiaoyan did not answer for a long time, assuming that he wanted to break up with her. The guy didn't like the fact that every time the girl didn't like something, she threatened to break up with him. Earlier, Xiaoyan had been worried about pleasing her, but now he just wanted to stop all of this. That is why now the main character with great pleasure offered Ruolan to break up, because he was fed up with everything and he did not want to serve anyone anymore. Without waiting for the girl Xia's answer, Yan ended the call and silently put the phone in his pocket. The main character was very happy that now he would get at least a little peace, but he had to hurry and sort out all the matters while he still had such an opportunity. Ruolan was very unhappy that the main character ended their relationship so suddenly, which is why she threw her phone on the bed in a fit of anger. The girl was also very angry that her now ex-boyfriend dared to just hang up and add her contact to the blacklist so that she could no longer call him. Shijun, who witnessed all of this, calmly asked if his friend had guessed everything. Ruolan found it hard to believe since she considered the main character to be very stupid. Unexpectedly, Shijun said that he had to take the ancient family heirlooms with spiritual energy because something big was about to happen. The girl remembered that Xiaoyan also kept some very old trinket. The guy was very interested in this, so he began to ask where this relic was kept. Ruolan said that it was with the main character's sister, whose name was Xia Yun. The girl then promised that when Xiaoyan calmed down and crawled to her with apologies, then she would beg for this ancient relic and bring it to her lover. Shijun was very pleased with this. At this time, the main character was already holding in his hand a small stone that looked very old, on which some hieroglyphs were visible, but they were difficult to read due to centuries of contamination. Xia Yun, who had just met her brother, was very surprised that he asked to give her this relic so suddenly, and even took a taxi 30 kilometers to her school for this. The girl was also very interested in why Xia's right eye Yana looked a little strange. The guy, without answering this question, directly asked his sister if she trusted him. Xia Yun was very surprised by such an unexpected question, but still answered that, of course, she trusted her older brother. Then, with a smile on her face and great enthusiasm, she reminded the main character that they always helped each other. After that, Xia Yun rushed forward to hug her brother, continuing to talk about how she always trusted him unconditionally, because she knew that everything he did was for her good. Hearing this, Xiaoyan asked the girl to go to school now and pick up her things, and then immediately return home with him. Xiaoyun immediately agreed to everything without asking any unnecessary questions. She turned around and started walking to school, while talking about how they would see each other in 2 hours. The main character was very surprised that his sister didn't even ask why he asked her about it. To this, Xiaoyun said briefly with a smile that she believed her brother. After that, the girl left, and the main character, looking at her, thought only about the fact that this time he would do everything possible to ensure that Xiaoyun survived. At the same time, the main character was clutching that very ancient family heirloom in his hand, because it was thanks to it that he was going to make sure that his words were not just empty promises. Unexpectedly, Xiaoyan, looking at this stone, noticed that something about it had clearly changed since the last time he saw it. The guy could not understand the reason for this. In these thoughts, he did not notice at all that mysterious energy began to emerge from his golden eye on its own. The next moment, the energy from the eye rushed straight into the relic, which greatly surprised Yana. This energy began to be absorbed into the stone, from which it began to tremble violently right in the guy's hands. In addition, the inscription, which had not been visible before, was now literally burning with bright hieroglyphs. The main character watched in fascination as the ancient relic came to life before his eyes, simultaneously emitting a mysterious aura around itself. The inscription said that these were the 6 great underworlds. Once the relic had absorbed enough energy, its aura began to rapidly increase in volume, as if it was trying to absorb Yana. A moment later, the guy was literally flying through space as if he had entered a portal of movement. On the other side, nothing was visible except darkness. Very soon, Yan found himself in an otherworldly world where in the center of a small rocky island stood a multi-story building in a traditional style. Strong iron chains extended from it in all directions. The main character was amazed not only by the appearance of this structure, but also by everything that was happening around. It seemed that he had already begun to guess what purposes this tower served. Gradually, an unprecedented force descended on Yana was getting lower and lower, thanks to which he could see that on each floor of this uprising there were various kinds of bloodthirsty monsters and demons. All of them were clearly unhappy to see a person here, which is why they tried to break out of their cramped rooms and attack the main character. The guy was very scared to see all this. Suddenly, bright lightning began to flash in the sky, which began to strike directly into the building. The loud sound of thunder and explosions echoed throughout the area. Soon turned out that these lightning bolts struck only monsters and demons. This seriously injured the evil spirits but did not kill them. Yan, who had already managed to descend to the ground, watched intently what was happening, unable to tear his eyes away. All this really scared the guy. Soon, to his own surprise, the protagonist realized that all these lightning bolts were holding back the monsters in the tower so that they could not escape or harm anyone. From these thoughts, Yanya was distracted by a mysterious female voice, which he had heard once before. The stranger took turns asking if the guy was scared. Turning to the unusual girl who had quietly crept up to him, the main character immediately asked who she was. The stranger with fox ears and many tails behind her back replied that her name was Sudaji, after which she greeted the warden of the underworld prison with a smile. Tens of thousands of years ago, the Eternal Emperor gathered 12 immortals, including Taibai, Taishan, Guanyin, Fuxi, Zhuanu, and others. This was necessary to fuse them together in a tower that suppressed the power of demons, which were the 6 great hells. Through the generations, immortal, furious beasts and sinful gods who committed terrible crimes were thrown into this tower to protect the human world from them. In this prison, all its prisoners suffered soul-searing torture from heavenly lightning day and night for many years. Sudaji continued to say that the token of pardon that was currently in Xia's hand, Yanya was the only one who could open the doors. That is why the guy was called the prison warden. After this, the fox demon asked if the main character wanted to go inside and check on his prisoners. During this walk, the girl promised to tell him everything in more detail. Xiayan, looking at the ancient religion of his family, felt that he had no right to refuse this offer, and therefore confidently agreed. After this, the main character of Revenge with his new acquaintance entered the tower, the entrance to which resembled a real portal to another dimension. The guy easily passed through the magical barrier that prevented the prisoners from going outside, but suddenly stopped when he saw what was happening inside the prison. Xiayan saw many bright lights in front of him, moving at great speed in a chaotic manner. This was probably another protective measure. Suddenly, several lights began to fly rapidly towards our heroes, which looked dangerous. Sudaji immediately warned the new overseer that he should be more careful with this. It seemed that the main character knew perfectly well what he needed to do, so concentrating he released a stream of fiery energy from his golden eye. Surprisingly, it worked perfectly. The energy protecting the prison from intruders disappeared in an instant after colliding with Jia's ability. Yana, who was now safe. Sudaji was very surprised that the guy managed to overcome this obstacle, and she called his ability impressive. The girl said that the flame in the guy's eye was really a fire seed, thanks to which he was able to restart his life. After hearing this, Xiayan assumed that it was the fox demon who spoke to him in his past life. Sudaji proudly said that her connection with the Jia family was very deep, and as a spirit guide through the 6 great hells, she could not just watch as the guy died at the hands of scoundrels. The girl continued to say that the despair and anger of the main character at the moment of death awakened a fiery ability that ignited the fire seed of the lower world, and at that time she simply went with the flow. Now Xiaoyan understood how he was able to be reborn, and besides, he was glad that he was able to awaken the power before the start of the apocalypse. The guy hoped that now everything could be different. The main character did not stay in one place and asked the fox demon to lead him further. The girl was ready to happily carry out the overseer's order. Sudaji continued to say that the 6 great hells were divided into 5 layers, and based on the boy's spiritual power, the illuminated doors showed the limit of his abilities. So far, only one door was dedicated. Looking behind this door, Jiayan was very surprised by who he met behind her. The boy immediately guessed that this huge demon looked exactly like the beast that Shijun rode on in his previous life. The imprisoned beast clearly didn't like the fact that the guy came to stare at him like he was in a zoo, so he immediately decided to show his character and growled loudly. The main character was very scared of this, which is why he froze in place for a moment, unable to even move due to fear. Suddenly, the demon bear noticeably softened when he realized that this guy was their new overseer, whom they had all finally waited for after 1,000 years. He was ready to help the main character in everything. Xiaoyan clearly didn't expect this and was in a bit of shock. At this time, Su Daji was indignant that the shameless black bear was groveling at the sight of the new overseer. However, both demons could not resist and, competing with each other, decided to show how happy they were for the main character. The guy felt very awkward about everything that was happening. Suddenly, from somewhere in the darkness, an ominous voice was heard, which said with obvious displeasure that the 1,000-year-old demon kings had sat in prison for a while and turned into dogs. One of the prisoners continued to say that there was nothing special about the warden, because he simply relied on the relic, and therefore if the guy wanted him to obey him, he should have made the heavenly lightning strike him for another 1,000 years. Approaching the next cell, Xiaoyan thought that first he met Sudaji, and now he also met the black demon bear. This meant that this prison was full of legendary creatures. The main character carefully examined the third prisoner, who did not want to communicate with him, and thought that his appearance was familiar to him. Still, the demon turned to Xiaoyan in order to look at him, thanks to which the guy could find out who he was. The protagonist assumed that this prisoner was the legendary Lei, Genzi, meeting with whom the guy was very impressed. Sudaji was surprised that the new supervisor was able to recognize this demon at first sight, and thought that she should not expect anything else from the capable guy Jia. Yan did not respond to this flattery. The girl continued to tell that in this world, monsters were divided into many ranks. She and the warden were now on the lowest level of the tower, where the general-level criminals were imprisoned. As the tower grew, the strength of the prisoners also increased. There were rumors that immortal sage-level criminals were imprisoned on the upper floors. There were even god-level beings, but they were lost in the flow of time. That's why the warden had to work harder, because he would have to grow in strength in order to subjugate the entire tower. Now the guy was only worried about the fact that this prison was even dirtier than he thought. The main character also thought that even the general-level creatures at the lower level seemed very powerful, so it was difficult for him to imagine who lived at the top. However, the guy quickly pushed away his fears. It didn't matter to him who those monsters were, because they would become part of his power. Xiaoyan had already decided that during the apocalypse he would have to become the strongest. Sudaji also said that with the current level of the guy's spiritual power, the first floor was still his limit, so he needed to absorb more souls to open more doors and go higher. Soon, Xiaoyan returned to the world he was accustomed to, but continued to think that in 3 days, when the gods descended to Earth, his hunt would begin, but for now, he needed to complete the preparations. Soon the main character arrived at the antique street, because in his past life someone came across the connecting thread of the immortal here and became a powerful bearer of the ability. Xiaoyan looked around carefully, studying the assortment of sellers, and thought that if he was not mistaken, the treasure should now be somewhere here. Luckily for the guy, the energy that came from the antiques could not hide from his eyes with the fire seed of the lower world, so the search process became noticeably easier. At this time, the head of the Song family and also Shijun's father, whose name was Song, were walking down the street. Tian and Elder Huang, who was an appraiser of antiquities. Xia among the people, Yana immediately became interested in what the guy was doing here. Sun Tian immediately remembered telling his son that he should only be friends with useful people. To this, Shijun replied that he was friends with the main character only because he could be easily manipulated. Elder Huang noticed that the man was thinking about something, So he asked if everything was okay. Tian began to assure that everything was fine and suggested that the old man continue searching for antiquities. While the old man was talking about how appraising antiquities was his only skill, the man was thinking about how, after the ceremony of offering to the ancestors, he had a dream in which he was told to go in search of certain things, especially for this son. Tian invited Elder Huang, and it was clearly not in vain that he did so, because the elderly man soon noticed a very interesting thing at one of the cellars. The old man's attention was drawn to the nondescript jug, so he enthusiastically offered it to Sun. "I'm going to take a look at it." Unfortunately for the old man, he did not manage to get what he wanted. Someone had already picked up the jug and asked the seller how much it cost, intending to buy it. The seller was glad that another gullible buyer, Jia, fell for his trick. Yan was already looking forward to making good money from his deception. The man replied that this was a Ming Dynasty gourd flask that cost no less than 10,000. The protagonist was very surprised by such a high price tag and thought that it was too expensive for such a trinket. After this, the guy began to carefully examine the jug from all sides, and even looked inside to make sure that this was exactly what he was looking for. Unexpectedly, the main character announced that there was a crack on the jug, which the seller tied with a piece of thread to hide this defect. That's why Xia Yan thought that this flask was just a fake and was not worth more than 100. These words made the seller very angry, so he snatched the goods from the boy's hands and demanded that he not waste his time anymore. At this point, Elder Huang asked the man for permission to look at the flask. Sun Tian and the antiquities appraiser began to carefully examine the jug, which the seller was very happy about. Meanwhile, Xia Yan was pleased that he had managed to do what he had planned. All this work was done by the main character only for the sake of the red thread, with which the unscrupulous seller tried to hide the defect on his product. The guy was happy about this because no one could have imagined that this ordinary thread was a magical treasure called the Immortal's Connecting Thread. Xia Yan put the relic in his pocket and then decided it was time for him to enjoy the show. In the past life of the guy, Xia Yun was captured by the Song family, who not only stole the religion but also sacrificed the girl's blood, so the protagonist intended to take revenge on the man. At this time, Elder Huang continued to carefully examine the flask and said that it had a faint trace of spiritual aura, meaning it was a real antiquity. Sun Tian was about to acquire this artifact, but suddenly he heard Jia's voice behind him. Yanya, who was supposedly surprised by their meeting, and asked if he had also come here to admire the antiques. The man was surprised that the main character was also interested in antiquities, after which he remembered that, according to his son, the guy had some ancient religion that they should discuss later. Suddenly, Xia Yan began to loudly speak to the whole street about how the man's family was very rich, so it was unclear why he was buying some kind of flask, after which he assumed that it was very valuable. This was heard by people who soon recognized the famous appraiser Elder Huan, and thanks to this they believed that this flask was indeed very ancient and valuable. Soon there were many people willing to buy this flask at a price much higher than the seller's son initially stated. Tian was very unhappy about this and said that he was the first to notice this relic. The seller was only happy about the increased excitement and invited buyers to place bets, saying that the highest price would win. Everyone immediately began to fulfill this condition. After some time, Sun Tianyu had already managed to get the desired relic, but he had to raise the price by another 70,000, so this purchase did not particularly please him. The man was very unhappy that this jug was only worth 10,000, but because of Jia's intervention, Yana's price has risen so high. Meanwhile, the guy didn't feel guilty about it at all. Suddenly, the protagonist turned to the man and asked if he was really interested in his Song family's relic. Tian confirmed this and asked the guy to show it to her. Xia Yan, without any hesitation, happily took out that very stone from his pocket and showed it to Elder Huang. Elderly man, seeing this relic, was shocked and immediately thought that it was a real treasure, after which he asked if he could take a closer look at this stone. Suddenly, the guy began to hide the relic back in his pocket, while saying that he couldn't just let someone look at this stone, because it was his family's treasure. Then Sun Tian, who was very interested in this thing, began to ask the protagonist for permission to look a little longer, insisting that Shujun was his close friend. The guy replied that he didn't know any Shujun, and then started to leave. The man asked him to stop and asked what he wanted to get in exchange for looking at the relic. The main character didn't think long and answered that he wanted to get money. He sold 1 minute of viewing for 10,000 and 5 minutes for 50, considering this a very good price. Sun Tian was very angry because of the guy's initiative and high prices, but still agreed to pay. After hearing a positive response from Sun Tiana, the protagonist immediately handed over the relic to Elder Huan. At this time, the man was transferring money to the required account with dissatisfaction. While the old man was examining Xia's valuable artifact, Yan started checking his banking app and was soon very pleased with how much money was in his account. The guy had a little more than 50,000 yuan, so the first thing the main character decided to do was stock up on food and water. There were enough empty cells in the prison of the 6 underworlds where supplies could be stored. Using the online application, the guy quickly bought everything he needed and even acquired animals, because everything that fit in the prison cells remained unchanged. Considering the huge expenses, it was not at all surprising that the main character soon ran out of money. This upset him a little. After that, Xiaoyan turned to the man and informed him that his viewing time was over and offered to extend it to Sun. Tian responded by asking if the guy wanted to sell this relic. To the surprise of Song Tian and Elder Huang, the protagonist very easily agreed to this proposal, which could not but please them. However, Jia Yan wanted to get at least 10 million for his valuable family heirloom, considering it a completely acceptable price. At the same time, Elder Huang and Song Tian had a completely different opinion. They were shocked by such a huge amount which they did not even try to hide. Seeing this reaction of Xiaoyan snatched the relic from the disgruntled man's hands, saying along the way that it had been kept in his family for thousands of years and was a real antique. That's why the guy thought that 10 million wasn't that much for such valuable items. After that, Xiaoyan began to leave because he had other things that required his attention. Elder Huang admitted that the guy's relic was indeed very ancient, but it was worth no more than 500,000, so it was worth negotiating with Xia Yanem and reduce the price to hundreds of thousands. Sun Tian was no longer eager to buy this relic, so he thanked the old man for his help and said that he could already leave. The elder did not object. After this, the man called his son and asked him to gather the clan people and immediately find Jia, Yana, and his sister along with the relic. Sun Tian was very angry with the guy and was therefore ready to resort to radical measures. In addition, the ancestors told him to find not only the relic, but also blood for sacrifice. Xia Yan seemed to sense this threat, but was glad that his assumption turned out to be absolutely correct. Everything was going exactly as the guy had planned, so soon he would definitely get what he wanted. Soon after, the protagonist met with Jia as agreed. Yun, who had already packed her things and was ready to go wherever her brother said. Xiaoyan took his younger sister's things and told her that they would first go home to Jia. Yun was happy about this. Suddenly, the excited class teacher Jia ran up to them. Yun, whose name was Bai Shiyin, asked them to stop. The woman began to ask why her student had suddenly packed up and left, because tomorrow she would have a water exam on which her future depended. To this Xiaoyan, he said that he asked Jia to do it. Yun went home with him, after which he added that his sister had to leave school, for which he asked the teacher for forgiveness. Bai Shiyin was indignant at this because Xia Yun was the best student in the class. She heard that the girl's parents died and that her brother took care of her, but she didn't expect that the guy would be so careless. The woman then said that she did not allow Jia to be taken away. Yun from school had a wonderful future ahead of her that could not be destroyed. The boy tried to explain that his sister was only skipping school for a while, but Bai Shiyin didn't listen to him and loudly said that school couldn't be skipped until the earth exploded. From this speech, Xia Yun and Xiaoyan was shocked and did not know what to say. The class teacher noticed this reaction and realized that she had overdone it with emotions. Because of this, the woman was very embarrassed, but she still continued to say that the students should not have left the school just like that anyway. The main character interrupted her and said that she was a good teacher, and as a sign of gratitude decided to give her one piece of advice for the near future. The guy said that Bai Shiyin, upon returning home, should collect as much food, water, medicine, and weapons as he could in order to survive the coming events. The woman was very surprised by such advice, but she thought that the main character spoke so confidently, he probably knew about the approaching end of the world. After that, our heroes left, leaving the class teacher alone. Bai Shiyin watched them go and hoped that Xia Yun everything will be fine. Soon after, Xiaoyan and Xia Yun was already home and packing their things. The girl asked her brother what they would do next. She also suggested that something serious was about to happen soon. The main character did not lie and confirm this, but promised that he would be able to protect his younger sister. After that, Xiaoyan gave the girl the relic and said that he needed to go outside for a while, after which he asked her not to open the door to anyone. Xia Yun listened to her brother but asked him to come back quickly because she had prepared food for them. The main character was noticeably happy about this. After that, he left the apartment, thinking along the way that while the relic was with his sister, he could always sense where it was. Now the guy needed to get more money. After some time, the main character had already gone down to the first floor and began to approach the exit of the house in order to do what he had planned. Surprisingly, Ruolan was already waiting for him there, and at that time she was talking on the phone asking her interlocutor to go to Jia's home. Yan Yu where probably was, and Xia Yun. Shijun was very pleased to receive this information and asked the girl to somehow detain the protagonist until they arrived. Ruolan immediately began to fulfill this request and, meeting the guy at the entrance, asked if he missed her. She also said that Shijun would soon join them. Xiaoyan didn't respond to this and only pushed the girl aside so that she wouldn't interfere with his passage. Ruolan was simply shocked by what happened. She couldn't believe that the guy rejected her. So without holding back her emotions, she asked him what it all meant. The girl also asked if the main character had really decided to break up with her. She asked him not to act like a child and not to be jealous in vain. Despite these words of Xiaoyan rejected the girl again and said that he was definitely turned on by the mere thought that they were in a relationship. After that, he coldly asked his ex-girlfriend to stay away from him. Ruolan was very angry at these words, so she began to call the guy ungrateful. Xiaoyan decided to play a joke and said that the girl dropped her dignity on the floor, so she should quickly pick it up before it was stepped on. Despite this, Ruolan still wanted to continue the conversation and loudly asked where the guy was going to go while rudely ordering him to come back and talk to her. The main character briefly replied that he was in a hurry because he was going to sell his house right now and showed the property documents as proof of this. Ruolan was very surprised because this was the only house that the guy owned, and it was supposed to be the home for the newlyweds, Jia. Yanhee replied that he needed money and offered the girl to buy it. Ruolan didn't understand what was going on because the guy suddenly started acting cold and now he was selling the house. He got it from his parents and it was worth at least 3 million. Still, the girl was interested in the offer to buy the house, so she asked Jia for how much money. Yan wanted to sell it. Without thinking twice, the main character declared that he would sell this house to his ex-girlfriend for 1 million and would not haggle. Ruolan was very surprised by such a low price, so she immediately assumed that the guy might have gotten into trouble and now he needed money to pay off his debts. Next, Xiaoyan asked directly if the girl wanted to buy this house. Because he was already going to the realtors, Ruolan of course wanted to buy it. But she didn't have that much money with her. 1,000 from her, and she would give the rest later to Xiaoyan did not agree to this proposal and continued to insist on 1 million in cash at once. Then Ruolan thought about the fact that the main character was already dead anyway, and even if she gave him 1 million, she would still return this money very soon. Therefore, the girl accepted Jia's conditions without thinking twice. Yana suggested that he go to a real estate agency right now to complete all the necessary paperwork. Very soon, the ex-boyfriend and girlfriend were in a tall, multi-story building, which housed a real estate agency. Ruolan talked to her mother on the phone and asked her not to worry, because she just wanted to buy a house at a very good price. She also promised that she would soon return the money she borrowed from her. The girl's mother was very unhappy with her daughter because she was dating a poor guy, and now she was spending all their savings on buying his house. Ruolan asked her mother to quickly transfer the money to the right account and assured her that this relationship would soon be over. Soon, Xiaoyan asked if the girl had everything ready, because he agreed to sign the documents only after receiving the entire amount. Ruolan, looking pleased, said that she had already sent the necessary amount. At the same time, the girl thought that the main character would not have time to spend this money anyway, because he had very little time left to live. At this time, Xiaoyan smiled slyly because his plan had worked again. The main character was very happy because he knew that when the apocalypse came, the houses would no longer be worth anything. But without this million, Ruolan would definitely lose all chances of survival. As agreed, immediately after the money arrived in the guy's account, he signed the necessary documents and handed them over to the girl, which made her very happy. After this, Ruolan suggested that the protagonist celebrate this event, which Xiaoyan agreed, thinking that this matter definitely needed to be celebrated. Along with this, his eye began to emit barely noticeable clots of energy. The first day of the main character's second life was already drawing to a close, but this did not mean that he could breathe a sigh of relief and relax. A group of guys armed with baseball bats were heading towards Zia's house. Yanya Shijun recently found out that the guy took his sister there. The noisy scoundrels intended to break into the main character's home while he was away and talk to the girl. At this time, the unsuspecting Xia Yun, as promised, diligently prepared dinner for herself and her older brother. The girl was so carried away by this whole process that she didn't even notice how the relic on her neck began to glow brightly, as if warning of approaching danger. After some time, a group of scoundrels led by Shu Jun were already standing near the right door and preparing to enter the apartment. To do this, the guy knocked loudly on the door and addressed Xia Yun, asked to be let in, saying that he was a good friend of Xia, Yana. The girl, hearing this, immediately headed towards the door and was surprised by Shi Jun's sudden visit. Looking through the peephole, the main character's sister asked why the guy had come here, since her brother was not at home at the moment. To this, Shi Jun smiled slyly and replied that he knew about this very well. He then went on to say that Xia Yan went to buy ingredients for that and asked him to come in early so the girl should open the door quickly. Xia Yun, who had no idea about the impending danger, believed the guy and was already reaching for the door handle to let Shi Jun into the house. At that moment, the girl suddenly remembered the words of the main character, who had recently told her not to open the door no matter who came. Xia Yun apologized to the uninvited guest and, without giving a reason, suggested that Shi Jun wait until her brother returned home. The guy instantly got angry because of this, so he started hitting the door hard with his fist and getting indignant that the girl didn't trust him. At the same time, he demanded an explanation for this. Xia Yun was very surprised by such an inadequate reaction, but only apologized again without explaining anything to the uninvited guest. At this time, one of the group of scoundrels realized that no one would open the door for them, and therefore took out his toolbox. The guy began to pick out a suitable master key while assuring Shu Jun that he shouldn't worry, since such doors could be opened without much difficulty. Anticipating the imminent entry into someone else's house, Shi Jun turned to Xia again with a satisfied expression. Yun asked if she had that ancient family heirloom with her. The naive girl honestly confirmed this by saying that Xia Yan had just recently given this relic to her. The next moment, the door lock was already open, which meant Xia Yun no longer had even this protection from intruders. Shi Jun opened the door with great pleasure, while saying that now he didn't have to worry about anything. Immediately after this, several armed scoundrels broke into the apartment with bad intentions, which really scared Xia Yun. One of the guys quickly grabbed the girl so that she wouldn't have time to run away or do anything against them. Shi Jun, watching everything from the side, began to insist that everything could have turned out differently if Xia Yun voluntarily opened the door earlier. After that, the guy took the relic from the girl, believing that it was exactly what his father wanted to get. Along the way, he made fun of Xia Yan and believes that he will soon be on his knees and apologizing. Xia Yun, who managed to escape from the villain's grasp for a short time, asked why Shi Jun did all this since he and the main character were best friends. To this, the guy with a crazy smile on his face replied that he was friends with Xia. I only did it because he was an idiot who could be used as a scapegoat if necessary. Xia Yun was shocked to hear this answer because before she had no idea that Shi Jun was such a scoundrel. The smug guy also said that thanks to the main character he met Ruolan, who soon really liked him, Xia Yun didn't want to dry all this and demanded to let her go. The next moment, Shi Jun decided to punish the girl for her insolence, and so he hit her in the face with all his might. Then the guy asked Xia Yun to behave more quietly, otherwise he would have to repeat what he did. All his friends were very pleased with what they saw. After this, the villain had bad thoughts about the girl, which they intended to immediately put into practice, which frightened Xia very much. Yun. At that moment, a bright light appeared out of nowhere, and a mysterious female voice addressed the guys and asked if they had ever heard of the lake of wine in the meat forest. A moment later, all the scoundrels found themselves waist-deep in warm water, surrounded by beautiful girls who were paying attention to them. All the guys were very surprised by this. All this took place in a large pond in the middle of a beautiful forest. Unfamiliar girls were happy to serve their guests. Several strangers had already cut the juicy piece of meat into slices so that the guys could eat it. Shi Jun was the first to be lucky enough to taste meat from the hands of a beauty, who at the same time called him king. The guy couldn't believe that all this was happening in reality. After this, the girl immediately asked if the king liked the meat she offered. Shi Jun was delighted and asked for more. The mysterious stranger was very happy to hear this, and perceived these words as the highest praise. Suddenly, an ominous aura appeared around the girl and her eyes began to glow brightly red. She told the guy that he had just eaten his own meat, which is why he liked it so much. The next moment, the villains finally realized that something was wrong around them. They were very scared by the bloody water that was everywhere, but the most frightening thing was that some of the guys had already had their hearts cut out alive. Looking around, instead of beautiful girls, they saw lifeless skeletons hanging from the trees. The name Lake Wine and Meat Forest was a perfect description of this place. It turned out that all this was the work of the demon Sudaji, who with her sinister appearance also offered the villains to taste other parts of each other's bodies. The villains who broke into the main character's apartment fell under the influence of the illusion created by Sudaji and were now almost dying of fear after what they had experienced. Xia Yun, who was watching what was happening from the side, was also very scared because she did not understand at all what was happening. The villains immediately assumed that they had seen a ghost who had deceived them. Shijun insisted that they had all once killed people, so they would not be afraid of such a creature. After that, the guy started to take out that very family heirloom of Jia from his pocket. Yana considered that it was in her that the monster lived. Shijun, unable to contain his emotions, he began to loudly curse at the stone, threatening to break it now and then the monster inside would definitely die. Suddenly, the relic seemed to react to these threats and began to emit a bright light while releasing ominous energy, which once again frightened Shijun. The next moment, a demon's clawed hand burst out of the stone, intending to attack the villain. Several deep scratches remained on Shijun's face, which caused him incredible pain. Because of this, the guy immediately forgot about the relic and dropped it from his hands. The stone bounced off the floor several times with a loud crash and rolled towards the exit door. Just at that moment, the owner of the apartment returned home, and the relic fell at his feet. Xia Yan immediately picked up the valuable artifact, which perfectly fulfilled its mission of protecting his sister from intruders. The main character was very pleased with this result and joked that it was very noisy in his apartment, as if he did not understand what could have happened there. The villains, seeing the guy, were shocked by his sudden appearance and also by the fact that he fearlessly took this stone in his hands. Besides, Jia Yanya came here, and Ruolan, who seeing the state Shijun was in, was very afraid for him. Frightened girl immediately ran to her boyfriend and began asking if everything was okay with him. Shijun did not spend much time explaining everything and ordered his comrades to take the valuable relic from the main character. At that very moment, the villains seemed to forget about what had happened to them not so long ago, and grabbing baseball bats, decided to carry out the order of their leader. The next moment, a group of guys fearlessly rushed towards Xia Yanya, who was not at all afraid of this and continued to stand in one place. At this time, the worried Sudaji warned the protagonist that the token's spiritual power had been exhausted because Lei Genzi rushed out and scratched that bastard. The demon bear couldn't do anything either. Xia Yan wasn't worried about this at all and said that now it was his turn to protect his sister and the family heirloom because he just wanted to test his abilities. The next moment, a stream of scorching flame burst from the protagonist's golden eye and headed towards the villains. The guys who burst into the apartment were instantly engulfed in flames, which made them very scared, because they could not have expected something like this. The villains experienced incredible pain, and no matter how hard they tried, they could not put out the flames. Some of them even managed to run into the shower and stand under the stream of cold water, but this did not help them at all. The fire continued to rage on their clothes. Soon, everyone who was touched by the fire died in terrible agony, and only after that, the flame disappeared. Shijun, who was watching what was happening from the side, was very scared and did not understand how this was possible. After this, the excited guy turned to the main character and, trembling with fear, asked if he really knew how to use magic. Ruolan was also very frightened by what was happening and demanded that Xiaoyan did not approach them and insisted that they were good friends to him. The main character was amused by the fact that the girl said such things, because Shijun had recently snuck into his house and taken his sister hostage, intending to steal a family heirloom. Shijun pretended that he didn't understand what Xia was talking about. Yan tried to explain that everything that happened here was just a misunderstanding. After that, the guy, hiding the knife behind his back, asked Ruolan to talk to the main character because she was his girlfriend, whom he was soon going to marry. Ruolan turned to Xia Yana and reminded him that he really was going to marry her. Then she said that she didn't even need a ransom and she was ready to marry him. After this, the girl in a gentle voice asked the main character to tell her where he got such magical power from, promising that she would love him forever. At this moment, Shijun drew his hidden knife and rushed towards Jia with a scream. Yana intends to kill him right here and now. The main character never lost his concentration for a moment and did not succumb to the sweet talk of the lying girl, so he was able to react in time and use his power again. The next moment, a bright flame enveloped Shijun and Ruolan, intending to burn them just like those scoundrels. At this time, Xiaoyan calmly watched what was happening and thought about why he had awakened the ability to use fire. Looking at the dying trembling of the burning bodies, it finally dawned on the main character, and now he knew the answer to this question. The guy assumed that it was all because there were too many dirty creatures like his friends in this world, and so he was going to burn them all to the ground. Meanwhile, quite a lot of people had gathered at the Song family temple to perform the obligatory service and honor their ancestors. Sun Tian stood before the altar and respectfully addressed his ancestors and asked them to bless the Song family. Nothing happened. Only the smoke from the burning sticks slowly rose high up. Then the man said that the wind and rain died down, getting stronger step by step. Immediately after this, the stone tablet that stood on the altar began to study energy, and a mysterious aura formed around it. From this energy a spirit emerged, which began to tell the man that in order for him to descend to earth, he needed an artifact of spiritual energy and the blood of a young girl as a sacrifice. Sun Tian assured the spirit of his ancestors that he would fulfill the order and that his son would soon prepare the much-needed gift for him. The spirit continued in an ominous voice, saying that the end of the world would come within 3 days, so the man had to hurry. Sun Tian was very surprised by these words and wanted to find out more about it, but the spirit of his ancestor had already disappeared. The man soon realized how serious the statement was, which made him very anxious. Without wasting a minute, the head of the clan turned to his subordinates and ordered them to immediately go and buy food and water, because the day of judgment was approaching. The man also asked to contact Shijun and tell him to urgently bring people to sacrifice them to the ancestors. At that moment, the gates that led to the temple grounds opened with a roar, which greatly frightened the people present with its unexpectedness. Xia walked confidently into the temple grounds. Yan threw Shijun's body to the ground while saying that the head of the Song clan had no need to worry so much. The main character himself came here and brought with him the body of Song's son. Tian, everyone present, was very surprised, and for a while they couldn't believe that Shijun was actually dead. Sun Tian was very angry that the guy dared to just barge into the temple of his family's ancestors, as if he mistook this place for some kind of passable establishment. Next, Sun Tian, in a fit of anger, mercilessly ordered all his subordinates to immediately kill the main character. Everyone present immediately began to carry out the order of the clan leader. Several guys with bare hands rushed toward Xia Yan, intending to teach him a lesson for his defiant behavior in a place sacred to them. At the same time, the main character was absolutely calm and concentrated hard in order to defeat his opponents as quickly as possible. The next moment, the guy suddenly opened his eyes and released the accumulated energy, which was accompanied by the study of the bright light from his golden eye. The protagonist looked forward as if time was slowing down, and clearly saw a core of warmth in the heads and chests of people who were quickly approaching him with ill intentions. Xia Yan was fully prepared for the fight and intended to demonstrate his skills to these people and the head of the Song clan. The next moment, the main character rushed towards the crowd of villains and, deftly dodging their blows, rushed forward with lightning speed, simultaneously setting all his opponents on fire with scorching fire. After just a couple of seconds, Xia Yan walked calmly towards Song Tianyu, who was amazed by what he had just seen and did not understand how this was even possible. The protagonist greeted the head of the Song clan with a smile on his face, while behind him his opponents were burning alive and writhing in pain. Sun Tian was very angry at the guy for allowing himself to behave like that in the temple of his family's ancestors, and it seemed like he already had a backup plan. The next moment, the man pulled out a hidden pistol from his belt and pointed it at the main character, intending to kill him right then and there. However, Xia Yan had nothing to fear because he could clearly feel the core of heat inside the pistol, which meant he could disarm the man. To do this, the main character only needed to snap his fingers and use his abilities. At that moment, the gun was in Sun's hand. Tian was torn apart by a small explosion, simultaneously wounding a man with shrapnel. Xia Yan, looking at how the wounds on the hands of the head of the Song clan were oozing blood, said with great pleasure that the man should not have played with firearms. After that, the guy thought that although his abilities were only at the first stage, he could simultaneously control 10 gallons of fire with a range of up to 2 meters for 10 seconds. Meanwhile, a worried Sun Tian quickly crawled to the altar and addressed the spirit of his ancestors, calling the main character a devil's spawn along the way. The man told the spirit that the Song family was on the verge of destruction and asked him to show his holiness because the lineage of their clan could not be interrupted. Hearing this, the spirit became very angry and loudly declared that he was an ancient constellation of fire named Inho and now intended to cut off the source of evil monsters. After this, the spirit sent several streams of fire straight at the main character, who clearly did not expect this. Xia Yan was shocked, and after Ying Huo's attack, he almost fell to the ground thinking about what he should do next. Meanwhile, Sun Tian noticed that his wounded hands no longer hurt, which surprised him greatly. In addition, all the male subordinates who suffered because of the main character felt good. Head of the Song clan understood that now the advantage was on his side in advance. Therefore, he confidently declared that the righteous God was destroying evil, and therefore Xia Yan's end has come. The next moment, the protagonist saw in front of him the very same patron spirit of the Song family, who had taken physical form and was now simply enormous in size. Xia Yan was surprised that the Song family had their own prophet of the end of the world. Initially, the guy wanted to steal a few ancient things and earn some money, but he never expected to meet such an opponent. Inho had no intention of talking to the main character and, intending to quickly rid the Song family of the threat, tried to crush the guy with his foot. Fortunately, Xia Yan managed to jump aside in time and avoid being hit by the fire spirit's destructive attack. However, Inho wasn't going to stop there and quickly attacked the guy with his hand before he could react. The next moment, a loud sound from the spirit's huge hand colliding with the ground echoed throughout the area. Sun Tian, who was watching what was happening from the side, was very happy to see all this and was sure that after this, the main character would definitely die. However, the man's enthusiasm quickly evaporated when he saw what happened next. It turned out that Xia Yan was not hurt at all, and now looked at his opponent with a satisfied grin on his face. Next to him was a demon bear, who had already bared his sharp teeth in order to help the warden cope with the danger. Xia Yan, standing on a fierce bear, addressed Song I Pulled and asked whom he had already managed to bury. A few moments before, Su Daji had approached the boy and told him that the Firestar Lord had accumulated a lot of power over 1,000 years and was one step away from descending to the earth. The girl was sure that if the main character managed to capture and absorb this spirit, he would be able to strengthen his fire abilities and the power of Xia's soul. Yana was interested in this prospect. The fox demon continued to say that the great crime token currently lacked soul power, but if the guy dared to take the risk, he would have a chance to win. Xia Yan wasted no time in asking what all this meant and what he should do. Su Daji replied that the guy could extract his own soul power and pour it into the great crime's token, after which he could give the order and call one of the prisoners for help. Xia Yan agreed that he could indeed do this, but he believed that if he could not restore his soul in time, then the demon he summoned would be able to escape from prison. Su Daji did not deny this. It was precisely from this perspective that the girl asked whether the protagonist was ready to take the risk. The guy already had some idea, so he confidently answered that anyone would take the risk, but definitely not him. The next moment, the protagonist concentrated energy in her golden eye and directed a bright beam straight at the relic. Su Daji was very afraid that this could somehow harm the artifact, so she immediately asked in an excited voice what Xia Yan has an idea. The protagonist told the prisoners that he had put hellfire into the token, and if he died, this fire would destroy the relic, the artifact to the demons and sinful gods. The guy continued to say that, without the token, no one in the world would be able to open this prison, and all the prisoners would never see the sun's rays again. That is why the main character confidently asked them to help him return alive, because he was sure that the demons already knew well what needed to be done. Immediately after this, Xia Yan separated parts of his soul and sent it into the relic, which was accompanied by a stormy flow of energy similar to lightning strikes. Because of this, in the world of the 6 great hells, a bright beam of light suddenly appeared in the sky, illuminating the multi-story prison. The prisoners, seeing this from their windows, immediately understood that this was their path to freedom, and therefore began to loudly ask the warden to release them all. Xia's silhouette appeared in the sky. Yan, who loudly called upon the spirit of the black demon bear guarding Mount Luoja in the South Sea, asked him to come fight side by side with him. The demon bear immediately responded to this call and prepared to carry out the overseer's order. The cage that held the mountain spirit began to slowly rise, allowing it to finally emerge after 1,000 years of imprisonment. After this, the bear flew out of prison with great joy. Su Daji asked him not to be stupid and not to forget that the main character should not die under any circumstances. Without wasting time, the black bear jumped high into the sky in order to pass through the portal and find himself in the world of people. After this, the two, unable to contain their rage, attacked Ying Ho in order to carry out the order and protect Xia from him. Yana the fire spirit never expected this demon to appear. The black bear was very happy that he was finally free and did not intend to hold back his emotions about this, while Inho sat aside and tried to comprehend what was happening. For some time, the demon bear was surprised at how bright and clear it was in this world, completely forgetting about why the main character had summoned him. Xiaoyan quickly calmed the demon down, ordering him to get to work immediately because the strength of his soul would not last long. I also assumed that the bear wanted him dead. The demon bear immediately began to assure that he had always been loyal to the overseer, and therefore the guy did the right thing by calling him. Inho with all his might, while saying that the low-grade fire spirit was no match for the mountain god. Inho tried to use his skills to summon fire, but was quickly hit in the face by a ferocious bear. The demon was very unhappy that the weak spirit of fire was still trying to resist him, so he did not spare any effort on him and did not intend to spare him. Soon, Inho seemed to begin to disappear. This worried him greatly, because his true body had crossed the line and he was no longer able to use all his powers, which meant he had to retreat. Suddenly, a rope wrapped around the fire spirit's neck and began to pull him to the side. It turned out that the main character predicted that Inho would try to escape, and therefore immediately used the rope that tied the immortals. A moment later, the two fires were completely pinned down and lay on the ground, unable to escape from the demon bear and the protagonist. Sun Tian, who had been watching everything from the beginning to the end, could not believe that the Firestar Lord had been defeated by Jia, Yan, and the demon bear he summoned. Suddenly, the man noticed a jug that he had recently purchased on an antique street at a very inflated price. The head of the clan immediately remembered that this jug was tied with a red rope, which the main character apparently took unnoticed and was now using it against the spirit. Xia Yan confirmed this with a satisfied expression and said that thanks to Song Tian's righteousness, he was able to obtain the rope that bound the immortals. The man looked with tears in his eyes at the spirit of fire, whom the main character had captured, while blaming himself for the fact that he had lost. Along with this, the ruler of the Firestar was already turning into pure energy, losing his true appearance. Soon all this energy was transformed into a small crystal, which the main character so desired to obtain. Xia Yan, being very pleased with himself, happily took this crystal for himself, rejoicing at another victory over the enemy. After that, the guy didn't worry about anything anymore. He turned to Sun Tianu and offered to discuss one deal with him. One of the conditions of this deal was Shi Jun, who, although seriously wounded, remained alive because the main character still needed him. Xia Yan directly asked the man how much he was willing to pay to preserve the Song family's offspring. Sun Tian was very pleased with the main character for boldly setting conditions for him, but now the man was in a losing position and could not argue. After some time, Xia Yan and the demon bear disappeared, and the head of the Song clan was already hugging his son. Shi Jun really hoped that his father would not give all the money of their clan to the main character. The guy was very afraid that in this case, they would become nobody. Sun Tian replied that there was no point in money because the end of the world was approaching, and the most important thing for a person was to preserve life. The man then ordered his subordinates to sell all the real estate and buy food and water, and then take everything to the bunker in his country villa. They also had to contact Elder Huang and buy up all of Song's old items. Qian He believed that thanks to this, the children of the Song family would be able to gain abilities and survive the end of the world. After this, the man, full of rage, swore that he would do everything possible to turn the main character's life into a real hell. Meanwhile, Xia Yan walked around the city as if nothing had happened and looked into shops, because his preparations for the end of the world were not yet complete. At that moment, the main character received a message on his phone that almost 30 million had been deposited into his bank account. The guy was pleased and thought that if it weren't for the lack of time, he would have been able to find out much more about the Song family, but now efficiency was his top priority. Then the main character went into the pharmacy and said that he would like to buy 1,000 Shanking pills. The girl was amazed because it was a common medicine for reducing fat and disinfecting poison. Xia Yan did not explain anything, and only asked if they would sell him what he wanted. The worried girl replied that the delivery of such a quantity of medicine could take 2 days. The main character, having heard this, promised to add another 20% on top if he received his order tomorrow evening. The girl began to assure that everything would be done. After that, the guy continued his walk, thinking along the way that there were only 10,000 Shanking pills in Fei Kui, but the largest number of them were posted on the internet. Xia Yan couldn't help but be amazed that for him, on the eve of the end of the world, the most important material would be the most unremarkable medicine like these pills. The guy remembered how in his past life he became very ill and even thought that he would die from it. Xia Yun apologized to her brother and regretted that she had not stocked up on Shangqing pills in advance because they helped speed up the awakening of abilities and were effective in suppressing the zombie virus. After this, the girl decided to go to the pharmacy to look for this medicine in order to help her brother, despite the fact that he asked her not to leave because it was dangerous outside. Xiaoyan recalled that then his younger sister left forever because very soon she was captured by the people of the Song clan. While thinking about this, the main character didn't even notice how he had already come home. The guy saw that now he had nothing to worry about because Jia Yun was alive and sleeping peacefully. Nevertheless, the guy was determined and did not want what happened to the girl in his past life to happen again. Then the guy continued to think about the fact that the Song clan already knew about the approaching end of the world and therefore they were stocking up on food. However, they had no idea that the most important resource in the early stages of the end of the world were people who had awakened abilities. That's why the protagonist believed that by obtaining the Shangqing pills, he would master a multitude of abilities that would make him like an entire army. Don't waste time. Xiaoyan took the family heirloom in his hand and began to absorb the energy of the fire spirit to strengthen his skills. The next moment, a huge stream of raging energy was released from the stone, which took the form of a lotus flower. Soon the main character managed to absorb all this energy into his golden eye, as evidenced by the drawing of the same lotus flower on his pupil. Sudaji congratulated the Warden on absorbing the fire spirit and reported that the boy's hellfire skill had been successfully upgraded to Scarlet Lotus Fire, which could break barriers and destroy laws. The girl also reported that Jia's abilities Yan's had also been upgraded to the second level, and he could now control the shape of the fire more precisely. The boy immediately tried it out by creating a fire sword in his hands. Xia Yan practiced a little more with his new ability, while being surprised that the spirit of fire turned out to be much more useful than he had previously thought. Suddenly, the demon bear approached the guy, who continued to rejoice that he had finally managed to get out of the cage and, in addition, his karma of sins had decreased thanks to helping the Warden. The main character quickly got tired of such excessive attention from the prisoners, so he pushed them away from himself and asked them not to interfere with his thinking. Lei approached the guy. Genzi said that it was better for him not to call him because he definitely would not help in any way and would simply escape from prison. To this Xiaoyan, he replied that as his abilities grew, he would be able to open a much larger chamber and therefore summon much more powerful evil spirits, so he did not need the services of the Child of Thunder. Said with great confidence that the time will come when Lei Genzi will have to beg him to summon this demon. After this, the main character returned to the human world and began to think about his pressing problems. Xiaoyan looked at the moon, which already looked strange, and thought that tomorrow would be the penultimate day before the end of the world, so he had to hurry and buy one more necessary thing. The next day came. The main character, without wasting time, went to the jewelry exhibition because that very necessary thing was located there. For some time, the guy walked around the spacious hall and looked at the exhibits presented at the exhibition until he found what he needed. Xiaoyan thought that the ore that was currently hidden behind the glass contained a large amount of ability strain, enough to increase his skill from the second to the third degree. In a past life, one lucky guy got this raw stone and advanced ahead of everyone else, gaining countless advantages. This time, the protagonist wanted to be that lucky guy. Meanwhile, in a separate spacious hall, an auction was taking place. People were actively making big bets in order to buy precious items. The next exhibit was a rough stone that had enormous potential. The girl said that this ore contained jadeite, which was valued at no less than 5 million. Soon the bidding began. At first, the price was 3 million, but the people sitting in the hall quickly raised the price to 4 million. Unexpectedly, one of the guests raised the price to 5 million. Everyone present was very surprised by this, but quickly realized that nothing else should have been expected from Hao because Ihao was a real asset. Group. Hao thanked everyone for their support and invited them to have a drink together next time. It seemed that the bidding was over, but suddenly someone offered a price of 6 million. Surprised, Hao immediately turned to the side and saw Jiayana, whom he had never seen before. The girl who was sitting next to him assumed that he was some student. Meanwhile, the administrator approached the main character and timidly informed him that they had a membership system and that in order to participate in the auction he had to have a black bank card. Xiaoyan didn't argue with this and showed his gold bank card, asking along the way if the man had any more questions for him. The administrator let the guy go ahead with a smile, thinking along the way that there should have been at least several tens of millions on the black card, and the unknown guy had a gold card, which was very surprising. The girl who was running the auction informed those present that the young man had placed a bid of 6 million, so now she was interested in whether anyone was ready to continue the bidding. Hao, without thinking twice, raised the price to 7 million, hoping that the main character would show him his character for the sake of their next meeting. After that, Xia Yan, without a moment's hesitation, raised the price to 10 million, without telling anyone anything else. Everyone present was very surprised by such a rate, because this price was much higher than the cost of the unprocessed stone, but Hao was the most shocked of all. The girl who was sitting next to him thought that the guy shouldn't be angry, because the main character was just pretending to be a rich man and nothing more. Suddenly Hao turned to his opponent and asked him what his name was. Xia. Yan told the guy his name without hesitation. After that, Hao praised the main character and said that he would remember him because he was very cool. After some time, Xia Yan was already taking the valuable thing he needed so much. The guy was incredibly happy that he was finally able to get it, because this ore guaranteed him an excellent future. After this, the main character was about to leave and finally heard that the next lot was a glazed glass fan, which delighted everyone present with its beauty. Attention to it, but soon he heard people screaming behind him, asking to save them because a real monster had appeared here. Turning back, Xia Yan saw frightened people who were trying to escape from some kind of entity that was emitting ominous energy around itself. The main character managed to examine this monster in detail. It was a large, aggressive snake with a human head. It seemed that this entity appeared directly from the fan. Xia Yan was very surprised by this, because he could not have expected that such an otherworldly creature could appear here out of the blue. The guy immediately assumed that the monster had come for him, because before the auction, the fan had probably been lying very close to the uncut stone and had absorbed some of the abilities contained in it. In addition, the main character believed that since the end of the world was approaching, supernatural events and the appearance of monsters and spirits were only a precursor to this. Along with this, Hao, who was not going to just run away, took his folding club in his hand and rushed towards the monster, intending to defeat her in a fair fight. However, the guy's hopes were not justified at all, because the monster was able to easily knock his weapon out of his hands without even stopping and continuing its way to Xia Yanu. Hao was shocked by what was happening, but he was even more worried about the main character, because it was towards him that the monster that suddenly appeared was heading. However, the guys shouldn't worry, because Xia Yan had already managed to stop this creature with just one hand, which meant that it no longer posed any danger to him. To break free with all its might, but the protagonist's strong grip was much stronger and nipped all these attempts in the bud. The guy decided not to stay here for long, so he quickly began to concentrate energy in his golden eye in order to quickly deal with this problem. The next moment, a bright flame completely enveloped the monster, intending to burn it so that the creature would not harm anyone else. Very soon, the otherworldly creature completely disappears, and instead of it, a small energy crystal is formed which could absorb Xia Yan. His neck lately, but Xia Yan felt that the cultivation level of this evil spirit was not high, so he only managed to obtain a small ability. After that, the guy began to go about his business as if nothing had happened, while Hao, unable to believe what he had just seen, fell to his knees, trying to comprehend what had happened. Suddenly, the guy began to admiringly call the main character a real master and showed a desire to bow to him as a mentor. Meanwhile, in front of the house where Xia lived, Yan gathered a lot of people. They were all surprised by the number of boxes and cages with animals that were delivered for one of the residents. People knew that Xia bought all of this. Yan couldn't believe that he had become rich. Someone assumed that the guy was going to start his own business. Everyone knew him as a good person, so they supported him. However, one grumpy woman believed that Xia Yana is just an arrogant boy who will certainly have no luck with his endeavor. She was skeptical about the idea that the main character was going to start his own business because she was sure that he was not capable of opening even a small store. Suddenly, one of the girls asked Aunt Zhang if she really wanted to rent the Xia family's warehouse earlier. Yana, and open your own supermarket here. The woman confirmed this, but said that she quickly changed her mind about the idea because she considered it a bad place for her business. Meanwhile, the main character had already approached his house, not paying attention to people, and was completely immersed in his thoughts about what else he should buy. Suddenly, one of the movers turned to the guy and said that they had already delivered everything he ordered and asked him to count everything. The worker also said that another car with goods would arrive tomorrow, but it might not fit here. Xia Yan replied that in that case, he would pick up everything from the central warehouse and deliver it himself. Aunt Zhang was very angry when she heard that another car would arrive for the guy tomorrow, and she couldn't believe that Xiaoyan really did get rich. She was clearly jealous of him. The woman did not understand how the guy could get rich because he was an orphan without a father and mother. She was also angry because the main character was going to open a supermarket in a place that she liked. Zhang, all this time, really wanted to go to the toilet, so he couldn't think of anything better than to relieve himself in Xiaoyan's warehouse. The little child, not at all embarrassed by the owner of the warehouse, who was very close, entered the room and began to do his business. The little child breathed a sigh of relief when he managed to expel the accumulated fluid from his body. The surprising thing is that Aunt Zhang did not scold the boy at all for this prank, but on the contrary, she was happy and praised him for his independence. The woman then turned to Xiaoyan as if nothing had happened, said that the baby was still very immature, and therefore she hoped that the guy would not object. However, the main character had his own opinion. He did not tolerate such treatment and therefore grabbed the child by the clothes to roughly drag him aside. After that, the guy, without any qualms of conscience, threw the child straight at Aunt Zhang, which greatly shocked her. The boy started crying loudly and the woman started scolding the main character and saying that the child just decided to play a little, and therefore he shouldn't have treated him like that. To this, Xiaoyan briefly replied that he was serious and therefore the woman should not get involved with him. After this, the main character closed his warehouse from the inside because he no longer intended to talk to the inadequate woman. Because of all this, Aunt Zhang became even more angry. Meanwhile, the capricious child, seeing how other children were playing with firecrackers, also wanted to blow something up. Hearing this, the woman instantly calmed down and thought about something. She had some kind of idea. Soon she took the child by the hand and dragged him along, saying that she would buy him a lot of firecrackers, and that in the evening they would put on an amazing show. Smiling slyly, thought that if some spark got into the warehouse and a fire started, it would not be very good for Jia. Yana. Meanwhile, the main character was still in his warehouse, and after looking through the boxes, he realized that everything he needed was already here, which couldn't help but make him happy. Without wasting time, the guy, using the relic and his ability, turned to the Tower of Demon Pacification and ordered it to collect all his things. At that very moment, a large portal appeared in the middle of the room, which began to suck in all the boxes that were in this warehouse. From the human world, all these things went straight to the entrance of the prison, which made Sudaji very happy, who thought that now she would finally be able to eat her fill. After this, the main character ordered the girl to find empty cells and put all the things there. The demon fox was very happy to fulfill the warden's order and asked him not to worry about anything. The girl also said that since the guy had a lot of animals, he could allocate a plot of land next to the tower to keep them, and if they were fed with the tower's aura, the meat would become even tastier. Xiaoyan was still worried because the end of the world was approaching, and he did not know how long it would last. He sent here more animals that could be used to preserve human civilization. Suddenly, the demon bear said that the guy should take up cultivating the land, because during a crop failure, the most important thing for living creatures was the land and seeds. The main character had already bought enough seeds, but he was very worried about the condition of the land around the tower. Xiaoyan suddenly jumped up and went back to the human world because he already knew what he had to do. The main characters found themselves in the suburbs and looking around, thinking about whether the demon tower could accommodate so much land. The guy didn't spend much time guessing and decided to find out everything in practice. So with the help of his ability, he began to absorb the earth and direct it to the other world. At this time, Sudaji watched in horror as a huge amount of earth fell from the sky onto her, which greatly frightened her and made her ask the warden to stop. The girl warned that the main character's soul power was insufficient, and because of this, the space around the tower was too small. At this rate, he could simply bury them all here. Looking around Xiaoyan, he estimated that he had collected at least 20,000 jins of land, but he still doubted whether it would be enough. The guy knew well that after the end of the world, everything that covered the earth would be unusable, and the now beautiful land that had not yet been subjected to the anomaly would become a great rarity the day after tomorrow. That is why the main character felt that he could not waste a single minute, and therefore he was determined to increase his spiritual power right now. Xiaoyan began to diligently absorb the energy of the fire spirit, which took him some time. At this time, Aunt Zhang, as she promised her grandson, bought a lot of firecrackers in order to put on a wonderful show. The treacherous woman looked at the gunpowder products with a satisfied expression and thought about how much she wanted to see Jia die. Yana. Suddenly, a joyful grandson ran up to her, holding something in his hands, asking his grandmother to look at this object. Aunt Jung was surprised to realize that it was a mirror and asked where the child got it from. The woman praised the boy for giving her gifts at such a young age. Suddenly, a small child, surrounded by an ominous aura, declared that there was someone in the mirror. The woman was very surprised by this, not understanding what the boy was talking about, and in the meantime, he had already pushed the mirror right up to her face. The next moment, Aunt Jang was horrified to discover in the mirror an image of a terrible monster that was looking straight at her. The woman was so scared that she couldn't even stand on her feet. She thought it was a real ghost and asked her grandson to immediately remove the mirror from her. However, the child seemed out of his mind and continued to push the mirror towards his grandmother, saying that she loved to look in the mirror. Aunt Jang was terribly frightened by what was happening and asked the child to stop it. But in the meantime, the mirror had already begun to emit ominous energy. The next moment, the same monster began to crawl out of the mirror and, baring its sharp teeth, headed towards the frightened woman. Very soon, an ominous energy seemed to enter Aunt Jang, causing her to begin to behave unnaturally. At this time, the possessed child laughed because he considered everything that was happening to be very funny and suggested that his grandmother play something else. Suddenly, the ominous energy began to leave the little boy, thanks to which he came to his senses and began to behave more adequately. However, the child was still in danger because this energy had entered Aunt Jang, who was now asking the boy to come closer, and in an ominous voice said that she loved him very much. Run away as quickly as possible, but the otherworldly entity grabbed him, preventing him from doing what he had planned. That night, strange phenomena occurred throughout the city. Many spirits and ghosts walked the streets of the metropolis, greatly frightening people. It seemed that all this evil spirits had not reached the port warehouse. One of the workers, heading about his business, noticed the sky and assumed that a downpour was coming. The man also noticed a ship approaching the port. He remembered that it was recently reported that one of the ships had caught a strange fish in the sea. The sailors were surprised that the fish's body was covered in pus and that a bunch of sharp fangs were sticking out of its mouth. The men assumed that all this was due to the discharge of wastewater into the sea, which provoked a mutation. Meanwhile, a warehouse worker entered the room and, looking at his watch, informed his colleague that it was almost time. I didn't get any answer. The man told his boss that he came here for supplies and expected to receive them. Suddenly, he noticed the man's hand, which had a strange color and was shaking violently as if from the cold. The man looked like he was in a lot of pain, so his colleague asked him if he was okay and if he needed help. The man looked like he was in a lot of pain, so his colleague asked him if he was okay and if he needed help. The guy then suggested that his colleague had caught a cold and advised him to ask his boss for a vacation in order to have a good rest and recover. The guy was distracted from this conversation by the loud footsteps of people in black suits behind him, who were approaching him ever closer. The guy turned around and saw the men. He seemed to recognize them, but was not entirely happy to see them there. Suddenly, one of them asked if all the Shangking pills were in this warehouse. The guy replied that all of this product had already been purchased by the client. Then the man ordered his subordinates to quickly take everything out of here. The men immediately began to carry out their boss's orders, while the warehouse worker did not understand what was happening and asked them to stop. In order not to listen to the guy's objections any longer, the man with the scar on his face pushed him aside. The guy couldn't stay on his feet and fell right on top of his colleague, who was feeling unwell. After this, the man again ordered his subordinates to quickly take everything out of this warehouse. As soon as the man started to leave, one of the warehouse workers suddenly grabbed him by the leg, as if preventing him from doing what he had planned. The guy grabbed the man's leg so hard that he started bleeding. The man himself was unable to keep his balance and began to fall to the ground. Looking at the warehouse worker who detained him, the man saw that his skin had changed color and sharp, long claws had grown on his hands. At the same time, the guy was growling and looked quite aggressive. The other men in black suits took this as a serious threat and, armed with whatever came to hand, prepared to fight back against the possessed guy. The men severely beat the warehouse worker and freed their boss from his grasp. The man with the scar on his face was very excited after what he had experienced and looked at the guy with incomprehension, not even guessing what could have happened to him. Very soon the man himself began to feel unwell, but despite the worries of his subordinates, he insisted that he first take the medicine before anyone else interfered with them again. Suddenly the men heard an unfamiliar voice asking if they had talked about him. It turned out that it was Xia Yan, who continued to say that all of this belonged to him because he did not spend his own money on it. The guy was not happy that the men wanted to steal all of this. Then the main character, with a smile on his face, suggested that although the end of the world had not yet come, men were already in a hurry to die. Then the man said that this entire logistics port belonged to his boss, and since the main character's goods were still in this port, the guy could sell it to them at a good price. Xia Yan, walking forward, briefly replied that he had no intention of selling anything. After this, he added that he gave the men 10 minutes to leave on their own. Otherwise, he would not be responsible for the consequences. Then the main character noticed a worker at the port warehouse who was lying on the floor and was surprised that zombies were already appearing, which indicated the imminent approach of the end of the world. The men were not prepared to tolerate Jia's arrogant attitude. Yana therefore prepared to grab him. One of the men tried to suddenly attack the main character, but he managed to simply disappear from sight in the blink of an eye. The man in the black suit immediately began to look around himself, but Jia could not be found anywhere. Yana. It turned out that the guy, using his abilities, managed to quickly climb to the very top of a high mountain made up of boxes, which greatly surprised the men. Looking into one of Jia's boxes, he saw that the things there were not his, so he asked if all the goods stored on this slope really belonged only to the boss of the men. The leader of these men did not understand what the mysterious guy was getting at and what he intended to do with this product. Xia Yan, preparing to use his ability, replied that he should use the enemy's knowledge against him, so he studied men and robbed them right now. The next moment, the protagonist used his ability and transported all the goods to the other world, which was clearly visible from afar. The next day, the owner of this product, who lived in a large mansion, received unpleasant news. The woman was unhappy that her subordinates failed not only to return the medicine, but also to allow all the other goods to be stolen. The man with a scar on his face timidly made excuses and said that the person who stole the goods had some kind of superpower. He recalled that there were a lot of things in the warehouse, but after the main character threw them out into the street and closed the doors, everything immediately disappeared. Only some time later, the men managed to open the door, but the warehouse was already completely empty. The woman heard this and was very surprised, but soon asked the name of the man who dared to rob them. One of the men immediately responded that he had already checked the recipient's information, which was indicated in the documents, and found out that this guy's name was Xia Yan. The woman thought that this guy had abilities similar to a spatial warehouse, so he should be captured at the first opportunity. The woman was distracted from these thoughts by her subordinate, who suddenly began to feel very ill and could hardly stand on his feet. Suddenly the man fell to the floor and began to breathe heavily. His appearance indicated that he had already completely turned into a zombie. The woman, seeing what happened to her subordinate, said that the virus had already managed to penetrate the brain, and even if the man now took the Shang-Qing pill, it would still be useless. That's why the second man should have thrown him out into the street and burned him, but under no circumstances should he grab the zombie or come into contact with his blood. Just at that moment, the zombie began to come to his senses and rise to his feet. The next moment, the infected man suddenly rushed towards the woman in order to harm her. Despite this, she kept her cool and quickly reacted, quickly using her ability, which surprisingly she had. At the same moment, the large windows behind the woman swung open from a strong gust of wind. After this, elastic tree branches entered the room and mercilessly pierced the zombie, preventing it from accomplishing its intended goal. The branches penetrated deep into the body of the dead man, who could still feel pain. Then the tree branches began to return back to the street, not forgetting to take the bloodthirsty zombie with them. Already on the street, the body of the infected man was torn to pieces, thanks to which the evil spirits no longer posed a danger to anyone. The man, who was watching what was happening from the side, was shocked and could not utter a word. At the same time, the woman remained calm and warned that this was only the beginning. Therefore, she ordered to continue searching for medicines and stocking up on weapons. She also believed that they should start strengthening the port warehouse, since one side of it was located to the coast. Finally, the woman ordered that all the workers be gathered and mentally prepared for the fact that the end of the world was coming. Meanwhile, Xiaoyan, while at home, handed his sister a pack of Shang-Qing pills and asked her to eat them. The guy said that the water and air were no longer clean, and therefore only mineral water had to be used for skin contact and drinking, and also to take pills to protect the body. Xia Yun was willing to follow all these rules, but she was curious about what was going on, and so she asked her brother to tell her everything, to find out about everything. But first he suggested that she take a walk to one place. Soon, our heroes were already walking along the dark corridor, heading towards the exit of Xia Yun. She said that this was the first time she left the house after returning from school, but she still had a bad feeling. Xia Yan. I assumed it was because bad people were starting to show their true colors. Suddenly, someone's voice was heard from behind the door of one of the apartments, saying that he was hungry and all the food was gone. Aunt Zhang, who was finishing off the remains of her grandson, was indignant that her neighbors owned everything and did not give her anything. She really wanted to get everything because she deserved it. Suddenly, a loud sound was heard somewhere above, which made the woman very angry, because she had already asked her neighbors more than once not to make noise because it prevented her from sleeping peacefully. Aunt Zhang, absorbed by the sinister energy, thought that people were specifically bothering her, so she ran out of the apartment in a rage to teach the noisy neighbors a lesson. Soon loud noise and human screams began to be heard from the house, which clearly indicated that the woman had managed to teach her neighbors a lesson. At this time, Xia Yan and Xia Yun was already getting into a taxi in order to get to the right place and take a walk there. Our heroes did not notice that guests had come to visit them. Ruolan's mother looked around and asked her daughter if the residential complex was safe. The girl replied that even if it was unsafe here, then Xiaoyan was a very strong man, and henceforth her home would always be next to him. The woman believed that they had not wasted a lot of money on a first-class plastic surgery, because now her daughter was very beautiful and would definitely be able to get the main character. Ruolan thought so too, because she was sure that Xiaoyan liked her appearance. Otherwise, he would not have been so kind to her before and would not have stopped courting her. The girl was sure that the main character would bow before her again, and then they would even be able to call upon rain and wind because the guy managed to rob even the Song family. Ruolan continued to say that if she appeared in front of Jia Naoyanem, then he will surely become her obedient peach. At this moment, the girl's mother noticed that the guy was leaving somewhere in a taxi. In order not to miss her chance, Ruolan asked her mother to quickly get into the car and follow the main character, because now he was a tasty morsel for them. Ruolan couldn't let other girls take this guy away from her. Soon our heroes arrived at the fake City Zoo. This is where Jia wanted to take a walk today, Yan with her younger sister. Suddenly they heard one of the visitors expressing indignation that the animal had attacked his son. The zoo worker asked for forgiveness and said that this usually did not happen here. Xia Yun, hearing about the aggressive animals, assumed that it was somehow connected with the end of the world. Her brother explained a lot to her during the trip, so the girl began to understand what was happening. The girl clarified that during the previous end of the world, people turned into zombies or mutated and acquired abilities, but her brother was lucky enough to awaken her before the apocalypse, so he knew everything. Jiayan confirmed all this, although he understood that he did not tell the whole truth, because he did not want his sister to find out about his painful experience from his past life and begin to feel even sadder. The girl then suggested that they should hide in order to survive the end of the world. Xiaoyan replied that this would only help them for a while, and in order to truly survive, they had to gain strength. The main character continued to say that he, of course, became much stronger than before, but still could not always be near his sister to protect her. The guy believed that anything could happen from the moment the end of the world came, so Xia Yun had to become as strong as him. Xia Yun, hearing her older brother's statement, was surprised and said that she would really like to become stronger so as not to be a burden, but she doubted whether she would succeed. This is precisely why the main character wanted to take his sister to the turtle zone without explaining anything to her yet. Meanwhile, Ruolan and her mother had also already arrived at the zoo. The girl did not understand why Xiaoyan came here, but her mother thought that this was a great opportunity for their chance meeting. Unexpectedly, Ruolan stopped near the enclosure with llamas because she needed to put on lipstick before meeting the main character. The girl was completely unaware of the ominous look the animals were giving her. They were clearly already affected by the approaching end of the world. At the same time, our heroes were already passing by a lake in which small turtles were swimming. Just at this moment, Sudaji informed the warden that she could already smell the strange creatures, which became stronger with every step. The demon bear also decided to share his thoughts and said that he always didn't like fighting with such creatures because they were stubborn and lived much longer than him. After some time wandering around this large territory of Xiaoyan thought with joy that he had finally found what he was looking for here. The boy and his younger sister headed towards a large turtle, which was sitting quietly on a rock and basking in the rays of the bright sun. Sudaji and the demon bear were shocked to see the 1,000-year-old turtle. At the same time, the protagonist thought that she had lived here since the construction of this zoo, which meant more than 100 years. Xiaoyan felt a little awkward when he saw the name of this turtle on the sign. Her name was Tiny. The guy remembered that this turtle was very famous in a past life because three descended gods were going to seize its habitat, but the old turtle refused to leave its home and bit the gods. The gods tried to resist and fought with her for several days, but they were unable to break through her strong shell, so the guy regretted that he had not entrusted his sister's life to her then. Xiaoyan walked closer to the big turtle and bowed respectfully, turning to it with the intention of talking. As expected, the turtle said absolutely nothing to the man and did not even turn its head in his direction. The main character immediately realized that the turtle was just pretending not to understand human speech, and therefore decided to resort to radical methods in order to make it talk. Demonstrating his strength to her, he began to say that he was hungry after the walk, and now he would like to drink some turtle soup. She understood everything perfectly. After this, the turtle immediately spoke and said that the man was very impatient. She then said that since ancient times, elders were respectfully bowed to, so she was interested in why the main character did not observe decency and immediately moved on to threats. Xia Yan. He replied that the end of the world was approaching, and they did not have time for all the formalities. Then he said his name and introduced his younger sister, who was surprised that Kroha was actually talking. The turtle felt awkward about this name, so she immediately began to justify herself by saying that she had received it from the zoo director by accident. The little one continued mysteriously saying that hundreds of years had passed since then, but compared to the 3 millennia lived, this moment was like a snap of the fingers. Sudaji and the black bear were shocked to hear this, and immediately told the warden that if he could eat the spirit of this turtle, he would extend his life for hundreds of years. Then the main character turned to the turtle and said that he came here to ask her to protect Jia. Yun, however, the guy was ready to fulfill any condition for this. To this, the turtle mysteriously said that all living beings were alarmed after the appearance of the blood moon, and after the end of the world, her turtle clan would certainly suffer. Xiaoyan suggested that if Kroha was talking about turtles swimming in the pond, then he could move them to the demon pacification tower and dig a pool for them there. The big turtle was very surprised when she heard from the main character about the Tower of Humility of Demons. Xiaoyan did not spend much time explaining anything, but instead showed the turtle that very tower and his ability to control it. The unexpected turtle turned its attention to one of the prisoners, who was on the very top floor of the prison. She immediately remembered the words of this sinful god, that this was the only opportunity for Xuanwu to ascend to the stage where the furious thunder rumbled. After this, the turtle suddenly declared that it was now clear to her what the cause and effect of her appearance here hundreds of years ago was. Then she turned to the main character and asked if he could properly manage this prison, because even though the end of the world inspired fear, if the guy goes down the wrong path, it will become tens of times more dangerous. The turtle also asked whether it was worth helping Jia at all, Yan if he cannot physically withstand the weight of her 3,000 years of life. Without waiting for an answer, Kroha began to fall at great speed straight towards the main character in order to test his strength. Xiaoyan raised his hands up and concentrated all his energy in his legs, preparing to hold the huge turtle. The next moment, a deafening roar echoed throughout the area as the huge turtle fell to the ground. Ruolan heard this rumble, which made her a little worried, so she wanted to leave here already. Suddenly, someone tore the wig off the girl's head, making it clear that the consequences of the collision with Xia last time Yanem was still reflected in Ruolan's appearance. Turning back, the angry girl saw that her boyfriend had been taken away by the llama. Ruolan was very angry at the animal and was already planning to teach it a lesson for ruining her wig. The alpaca quickly calmed the grumpy girl down by literally spitting right in her face. The next moment, several aggressive alpacas began to attack Ruolan in order to teach her a lesson for her inappropriate behavior. The girl and her mother could do nothing about it and only tried to cover themselves with their hands so that it would not harm their eyes. Ruolan was very angry at the animals and was about to take revenge on them, but the girl's mother asked her daughter to leave the alpacas alone because now they needed to find Jia. Yana. Somehow the woman managed to put the wig back on Joe's head. Lan. But this did little to help the girl's appearance. Noise came from, which meant that the main character was probably somewhere there. Ruolan and her mother walked further and further into the turtle's habitat, but could not find Jia. Yana, therefore, decided to go even further despite the stench that was all around. The girl's mother was in such a hurry that she didn't even notice how she stepped on the turtle's eggs, breaking several of them in the process. The woman did not regret what she had done at all, and was only indignant that the vile substance had stained her shoes. Without thinking twice, she began to wipe her shoes on the turtle's shell, while saying that this was the only thing animals were good for. After this, The mother and daughter continued their journey deeper into the forest, completely unaware that the turtle's behavior was already very different from their norm. Ruolan said with great joy that they only needed to go around a large tree, and behind those leaves they would definitely see Xia, Yana. The girl believed that the main character would definitely be touched by the fact that she, Fragile, made her way through the thickets of trees because of her deep feelings of love for him. Roland quickly made her way through the dense thickets, not even suspecting what awaited her ahead. Walking a little further forward, the girl was dumbfounded with fear because she saw in front of her a huge turtle, which was looking at her with clearly unkind eyes. The next moment, the turtle bit Roland's hand. The turtle's teeth were usually sharp and small, and their bite was very powerful, so it was incredibly difficult to break free from their grip. The turtle grabbed tightly onto Roland's hand, and she lost her balance in surprise and fell to the ground. The girl tried not to scream because she thought that otherwise Xiaoyan noticed how ugly she was. At the same time, her mother couldn't hold back her scream when someone bit her leg. It turned out that the woman was attacked by several turtles at once, who had no intention of taking pity on her. The mother and daughter, having become victims of aggressive turtles, no longer thought about anything other than their salvation and the incredible pain that the bites of these animals brought them. Ruolan tried to run away, calling Xia along the way. Yana came to the rescue, but it was very difficult to run along the sandy coast in high-heeled shoes. As a result, the girl was unable to keep her balance and fell into the water, which seemed very unusual and disgusting to her. Meanwhile, the main character continued his confrontation with the huge turtle, which intended to crush him with its shell. The black bear turned to the guy and asked him to call him for help, and then they would be able to defeat this turtle and then eat its meat. Xiaoyan refused this help. The main character continued to resist, making incredible efforts to do so. His entire body had already begun to tremble from exhaustion. Gradually, the enormous weight of the turtle forced Xiaoyan sank lower and lower, and now he was already standing on one knee, leaning against the ground. The turtle asked the guys to stop resisting because all creatures were meant to live and die. Also, the baby believed that the main character would not be able to do anything until the end of the world. The turtle continued saying that the guy should have entrusted the Tower of Pacification to her, because then she would take care of protecting the main character and his loved ones, and then the destruction of the world would not affect them. Xiaoyan did not listen to his opponent's speech at all, and tried to concentrate as hard as possible on the problem at hand, but he was greatly hampered by the Sanskrit that was swirling around his head. The turtle then went on to say that such an evil thing as the Demon Suppression Tower was not something the protagonist could be held responsible for. The Sanskrit that enveloped the guy from all sides, and therefore the prison of demons, seemed to suck out the life force, which is why Sudaji and the black bear felt very unwell. Zia's seemingly hopeless situation, Yan did not give up and took the turtle's words as an outright lie. Suddenly, energy began to fill the body of the main character, who at the same time asked the old turtle, who had already lived for so long, whether she had heard about one truth. Xiaoyan, without wanting to, made incredible efforts because he believed that the truth was that he who did not move forward was moving backwards. The next moment, the protagonist managed to stand up and straighten his back despite the enormous mass of the turtle that was pressing down on him from above. However, the confrontation is not over yet. Now Xiaoyan needed absolutely all his strength to take the final step that separated him from victory. The main character threw the huge turtle to the side, which surprised her very much because she didn't expect to see such strength in a person. The baby was shocked by what happened and did not understand how Xiaoyan managed to free himself from the influence of her Sanskrit. Meanwhile, the guy had already taken out a rope that was capable of tying up immortals and tried to make the turtle stop resisting him. After this, the main character threw a rope around the turtle's neck, after which it could no longer resist even if it tried. The black bear urged the boy to kill the turtle right now. Sudaji agreed because of her, the warden almost went astray. But fortunately, he had a strong will that distinguished him from others. Finally, Xiaoyan set a condition for the old turtle. She could either obey him or die right now. The little one understood her hopeless situation, so she chose the second option.